A bodybuilder had spent 6 long years sculpting a physique that appeared genuinely intimidating. Bruce Lee required only 5 seconds to demonstrate that appearances could be deceiving. The entire incident unfolded in an airport check-in line, before approximately 40 onlookers. Yet the most remarkable element wasn't the confrontation itself. It was what Bruce chose to do in its aftermath. San Francisco International Airport, September 1972. It is 9:15 in the morning, and the terminal hums with the familiar Saturday bustle. The United Airlines queue stretches through a roped-off corridor with roughly 20 passengers waiting their turn. It advances at a sluggish pace, the restless rhythm of travelers who know exactly where they need to be but have no means of getting there any faster. Bruce Lee stands third in line. He is dressed in a black leather jacket worn over a white shirt, dark trousers, and a pair of sunglasses that partially shade his face. In one hand, he holds a gray Samson suitcase containing 3 days' worth of clothing and documents prepared for meetings with producers in Los Angeles. His stance is composed and steady, that of someone entirely comfortable with waiting. He doesn't glance at his watch, he simply advances as the queue moves forward. A few passengers have already recognized him, exchanging quiet whispers among themselves. That's the guy from the Green Hornet. The murmurs rise and fade without ever amounting to anything further. Bruce doesn't acknowledge them. In this moment, he is not a celebrity. He is simply a man waiting to check his luggage on an unremarkable September morning. The bodybuilder makes his entrance at 9:22. He is 28 years old, standing 6'1" and tipping the scales at 265 pounds, an amateur competitor hailing from San Jose. 6 relentless years of dedicated weight training have developed a chest measuring over 55 inches and arms reaching 22 inches around. His expression carries the effortless self-assurance that comes naturally to those who have long moved through the world in a commanding physical form. He is running behind schedule for his flight. A friend of comparable build trails half a step behind him. Together they move through the terminal with the easygoing confidence of men who have never once needed to push through a crowd, because the crowd has always instinctively stepped aside for them. He works his way along the check-in queue like a large vessel navigating a narrow waterway. He nudges the first man in line, a businessman carrying a briefcase, with his shoulder. The man yields without a word of protest. Next, an elderly woman who clutches her handbag tightly to her chest and says nothing. He continues pushing forward until he reaches Bruce Lee and repeats the very same gesture, the same sideways shove, the same unspoken expectation that the smaller body will surrender ground to the larger one, just as it always does in crowded public spaces. But Bruce doesn't budge. He barely shifts his weight, rotating just a couple of degrees. The shove finds no compliance, no resistance, no reaction whatsoever. It simply fails to register. Bruce continues facing the counter as though nothing has made contact with him, because in every meaningful sense, nothing truly has. The bodybuilder comes to a halt. This has never happened to him before, not in a public setting, not against someone of that stature. He stares at Bruce with the expression of a man whose most straightforward calculation has just produced an impossible answer. For a brief moment, his mind appears suspended between two paths: recalibrate his understanding, or double down on the response that has never once failed him. "Hey," he says at last, "I need to get through. Big guy coming. Move." Bruce doesn't. "Turn around immediately." He continues facing forward as though the words hadn't quite finished being spoken. When he finally turns, he does so slowly and completely, offering the man his full and undivided attention with the ease of someone who feels absolutely no pressure to prove a single thing. He studies the man for a brief moment over the rim of his sunglasses. Then, in one unhurried motion, he removes them and tucks them carefully into the inside pocket of his jacket. "The line belongs to everyone," Bruce says. His voice carries no aggression, no elevation in tone, just clarity and steadiness, the voice of someone stating something plainly obvious. "Wait your turn." The bodybuilder blinks. He had mentally prepared for many possible reactions from the smaller man: a hasty apology, an immediate step aside, Perhaps an awkward, nervous laugh, the kinds of responses his physical presence typically produces without him uttering a single word. But this was not among them. Composure, he finds, is far more unsettling than outright defiance. His eyes move instinctively across Bruce's frame, then travel back to his own arms, running the near-automatic comparison that 6 years immersed in gym culture have conditioned him to perform. He estimates the weight, somewhere in the 60s, perhaps touching 70 kilograms with the jacket included. He notes functional-looking arms, but nothing that registers as remarkable by the standards he has come to rely upon. Every physical equation in his mind points toward the same conclusion. That man should be stepping aside right now. "Look, buddy," he says with an air of patronizing patience, "I'm twice your size. Either move or I'll move you myself." Bruce's expression doesn't shift. His voice doesn't rise. His posture doesn't change. He simply replies, "Try it." It doesn't land as a threat. It doesn't carry the weight of theatrical bravado. It sounds more like a quiet, courteous invitation, an open door, extended with perfect calm, into a room the bodybuilder has not yet realized he is wholly unprepared to enter. Before the tension can escalate further, an airline employee steps forward from behind the counter. "Gentlemen, please, there will be no disturbances here. Everyone will be attended to in order. Kindly hold your place in line." The bodybuilder retreats a single step. His ego hasn't been wounded just yet. It has simply been put on temporary hold. He takes up his position behind Bruce with the restrained impatience of a man who has already resolved that another opportunity will arise soon enough to re-establish what he believes is a hierarchy that a man far too small to challenge it has. Just momentarily disrupted, that opportunity presents itself only minutes later. When Bruce sets his suitcase down onto the counter scale, the zipper has not been fully secured. While waiting in the queue, he had been sorting through some documents and had not properly refastened it afterward. The bodybuilder notices immediately. What follows could, in the most generous interpretation, be described as an accident, a large foot, moving carelessly through a congested space, making contact with a piece of luggage and sending it to the floor. That is one version of events. The other is considerably more straightforward. The bodybuilder deliberately kicks the suitcase off the scale with precisely calculated force, sending it skidding across the terminal floor. The zipper bursts open upon impact, and the contents spill out across the polished floor of San Francisco International Airport on that Saturday morning in September 1972. 2 shirts, a pair of training trousers, and several personal belongings lie scattered across the floor as roughly 40 people bear witness. The bodybuilder releases a laugh, not a spontaneous one, but the deliberate, measured laugh of a man who believes he has successfully reasserted his dominance while preserving the thin veneer of accidental clumsiness. Then he adds words to go along with it. He turns slightly toward his companion, pitching his voice at a volume calculated with precision, loud enough for Bruce and every person within 10 meters to catch every word, but restrained enough to avoid sounding like an outright declaration. "Look at the little Chinese man picking up his things off the floor. He ought to learn not to get in the way of people bigger than him." His friend laughs. Several bystanders drop their gaze toward the ground. Others make a deliberate effort to appear, as though they heard nothing at all. The airline employee behind the counter stands completely motionless. Bruce Lee shows no visible reaction. He lowers himself to one knee on the terminal floor and begins gathering his belongings with slow, deliberate, unhurried movements. These are the movements of a man who has already arrived at a decision about how he intends to respond and feels no urgency whatsoever to act on it prematurely. He folds the first shirt with care, then the second. He lays the trousers neatly on top. He retrieves each personal item individually and places everything back into the suitcase with the same measured calm of someone tidying their workspace. At the close of a long day, the bodybuilder's laughter persists for several more seconds before it begins to lose momentum. Laughter requires a reaction to keep it alive, and Bruce offers nothing to feed it. A silence gradually expands to fill the space the laughter had previously occupied. The man attempts to compensate with one more remark, something about how certain people simply fail to grasp that the world operates according to a natural order. But the words no longer carry their earlier conviction. They sound hollow now, even to the people who might have been inclined to agree. Bruce finishes repacking everything, rises unhurriedly to his feet, and closes the suitcase with a clean, decisive click. Then he turns and looks directly at the bodybuilder. All 40 witnesses fall silent. Bruce speaks with absolute and unmistakable clarity. "You owe me an apology," he states, "or I will show you exactly why size without skill is nothing more than dead weight." He doesn't deliver it as a threat. He says it the way a physician announces an unavoidable diagnosis, not with emotion, but with fact. The bodybuilder stares back at him. He runs through the numbers one more time. Just over 60 kilograms, 1.70 meters in height, arms that by his personal standards wouldn't turn a single head. For 6 straight years, that same calculation has reliably produced the same outcome. He convinces himself that today will be no different. He flashes a smirk toward his companion, shifts 1 foot forward, and extends his right hand in the direction of Bruce's chest. That familiar gesture of applying just enough pressure to assert dominance without technically crossing into a full act of aggression. Technically, it qualifies as one, but the hand never makes contact. In the 5 seconds that follow, something unfolds that multiple witnesses would carry with them for the rest of their lives. In the first second, Bruce's left hand intercepts the man's wrist and redirects the momentum outward with such fluid, economical precision that several onlookers would later swear the bodybuilder's own arm appeared to change its mind about where it had intended to travel. In the second second, Bruce's right leg launches forward in a side kick directed squarely at the solar plexus. The movement is so explosively rapid that the human eye barely registers it happening at all. The destructive potential of a strike has nothing to do with the size of the body delivering it. It depends entirely on how that body moves as one unified mechanism. Specialists refer to this as the kinetic chain. It begins with the legs driving forcefully against the ground. The hips then rotate with sharp, deliberate accuracy. The torso contracts and follows through. Every element of this coordinated sequence funnels the body's total energy toward a single concentrated point. The force is born at the ground, travels upward through every linked segment of the body, and arrives fully loaded in Bruce's extended leg. The blow lands precisely where energy transfer is most devastatingly effective, the diaphragm. This is the reason why Bruce Lee's 63 kilograms, organized into a flawless chain of sequential movement, can produce more destructive force than 120 kilograms of untrained bulk, where the body operates as a collection of disconnected parts, rather than a single coordinated instrument. Genuine power does not live in size, it lives in the efficiency of motion. In the third second, the impact reaches the bodybuilder's diaphragm. The muscle seizes into immediate spasm. His mouth falls open wide, yet not a single sound escapes. The air neither enters nor exits his lungs. His hands instinctively clutch at his abdomen as his entire body struggles to make sense of what has just been done to it. In the 4th second, Bruce has already repositioned himself. His left leg sweeps cleanly beneath the bodybuilder's only remaining point of support, at the precise instant when his entire body weight is fully committed to it. The mechanics are elegantly simple. Eliminate the base of support at the exact moment the center of gravity has already shifted beyond recovery. The outcome is not a slow, graceless stumble. It is an instantaneous, total collapse. In the 5th second, 120 kilograms of the bodybuilder strikes the airport floor with a reverberating thud that ripples outward in every direction. He lies flat on his back against the terminal's linoleum, fully conscious but absolutely incapable of producing any response whatsoever. Bruce Lee does not follow him down to the ground. He does not crouch over him. He does not offer a single word of commentary. He simply pivots back toward the counter, retrieves his suitcase, and informs the airline employee with complete and unruffled composure. "My apologies for the interruption. My bag is well within the weight allowance." The people watching stare at the scale as though it requires a few additional seconds to recall what everyone had been doing before the world briefly rearranged itself. "Yes, 19 kilograms, the employee finally manages. "That's within the limit." He prints the boarding pass. His hands tremble noticeably as he passes it across the counter. Bruce accepts it with a polite nod of acknowledgement, turns, and makes his way unhurriedly toward the departure area, as though absolutely nothing out of the ordinary has taken place. Behind him, the bodybuilder slowly begins to reclaim his breath. It takes him the better part of 2 full minutes before he is able to push himself upright into a seated position. His companion assists him while he attempts to process the sequence of events his mind is still struggling to fully absorb. When he finally manages to get back onto his feet, his eyes sweep across the terminal in search of Bruce. He is not looking to resume anything. He is looking with the expression of a man whose foundational understanding of how the world operates has just been corrected in the most direct and irreversible manner imaginable. For 6 consecutive years, he had held an unshakable belief that 120 kilograms of developed muscle represented an ironclad guarantee of physical dominance in any confrontation. That belief ceased to exist in 5 seconds. Years afterward, a bodybuilding publication ran an anonymous interview with a competitor who recounted how he had come to understand the profound distinction between aesthetic strength and functional strength, following a very public confrontation that left him humiliated in front of 40 complete strangers inside an airport terminal. In that interview, he said, "I devoted 6 years to constructing a body that looked dangerous. I found out in 5 seconds that looking dangerous and actually being dangerous are 2 entirely separate things. What lingered with him most over the years," he would later clarify, "was not the speed of the blow. It was not the technique. It was not even the public humiliation, as searing as that had been. It was what came immediately afterward. The man who handed me that lesson," he explained, "didn't say a word. He simply collected his boarding pass and walked away." That detail continued to haunt him long after everything else had softened in. Memory. Not the physical skill, not the fall, but the quiet and unmistakable sense that for Bruce Lee, this had not been an exceptional moment. It had been entirely routine. As unremarkable as checking a piece of luggage. 5 seconds. That is the number at the heart of this story. 5 seconds from the moment the bodybuilder reached out his hand to assert dominance until he found himself lying on an airport floor, unable to draw breath. 5 seconds that contained the entire distance between size and skill, between raw mass and precise execution, between a body weaponized for intimidation and a body refined into an instrument of genuine capability. The bodybuilder had brought 6 years of training to that airport on a Saturday morning. Bruce Lee had brought 20. And the difference between those 2 very different kinds of work became visible, unmistakably, indelibly visible, in 5 seconds flat, in a manner that no lecture, no article, and no amount of explanation could ever have communicated more effectively. Half a century later, every time someone inside a weight room confuses the dimensions of a muscle with the true capacity of the body that carries it, the lesson remains exactly where it has always been, waiting patiently to be learned. Because some lessons demand a very particular kind of teacher, and sometimes those teachers show up at airports on quiet Saturday mornings, wearing a leather jacket, carrying a gray suitcase, with nothing but the calm willingness to wait their turn in line, right up until the precise moment it becomes time to teach.